In the city of Delaware, the renowned and well-known lawyer Thomas Capano met businesswoman Ann Marie Fahey at an exclusive event hosted by a major corporation. Ann, in her 30s, was an attractive and intelligent woman, but she felt a sense of loneliness in her personal life. On the other hand, Thomas was known for his charm, good looks, and high social status. At first, their meeting seemed casual, but it left a deep impression on Ann. There was something strange that drew her toward Thomas, especially since he possessed an unusual charisma and an ability to listen to her like no one else. She didn't know then that this encounter would mark the beginning of a dark future. Soon, their relationship evolved into something more than just casual meetings. Thomas began visiting Ann at her office, and they exchanged private conversations in public places without anyone noticing. They soon started spending time together away from the public eye. Their relationship was built on the fear of being discovered by others, which made it all the more thrilling. As time passed, tension began to grow between them. Ann felt trapped between her love for him and the fear that this relationship might be more complicated than she had ever imagined. She sensed there was a dark side to Thomas's personality that she had yet to uncover. Thomas Capano was not only a prominent lawyer in Delaware, but he was also one of the most influential figures in legal circles. However, behind his public success, there was a dark secret he kept hidden from everyone. Ann began to sense that something strange was happening with him. He would disappear for hours and avoid answering some of her questions in a mysterious way. Sometimes he would abruptly change the subject if she got too close to asking about his past. There were also unconfirmed rumors circulating about him, but Ann tried to ignore them. As time went on, these secrets began to make her feel uneasy. Was he lying to her, or was he hiding something even bigger? As time passed, the relationship between Thomas and Ann began to tense. Jealousy and the fear of scandal began to control everything between them. Thomas started exhibiting strange behaviors and became more controlling of Ann's actions. He began to ask her not to communicate with other people and even imposed a kind of social isolation on her. Ann started to feel trapped in a toxic relationship, almost as if she were losing her personal identity. One day, they got into a heated argument when Thomas accused her of talking to one of her close friends. This marked the beginning of a dramatic shift in their dynamic. Ann's life began to change dramatically when she discovered that Thomas had been continuously monitoring her. She would find cryptic text messages on her phone and discover that she had been missing for hours without knowing where he had been. Her anxiety grew when she noticed that Thomas was acting more aggressively recently. She began to feel that she was trapped in a relationship with a man who was revealing his true nature. At that moment, Ann began to question Thomas's intentions. Was he the man she had once known, or was there a darker side to him that he couldn't escape? That night in June was the last time Thomas and Ann met. Thomas appeared strange that night. His eyes were hazy, and his voice was tense. Ann later said that he yelled at her in a way she had never experienced before. After this meeting, Ann Marie Fahey disappeared without a trace. Thomas tried to cover up any signs of the incident, but things began to spiral out of control. When the police discovered Ann's disappearance, major questions arose regarding her whereabouts and Thomas' involvement in her vanishing. When Ann Marie Fahey was reported missing, the police began investigating. Ann's friends and family were in a state of panic. Everyone knew that the relationship between Ann and Thomas had been mysterious, but no one expected it to escalate into a bizarre disappearance. The investigation took a new turn when evidence surfaced suggesting that Thomas was the last person seen with Ann before her disappearance. The police started delving into the details of their relationship and Thomas' life, which was filled with secrets. After some time investigating Ann Marie Fahey's disappearance, the evidence began to point in one direction. There was one person who knew every detail of Ann's life. The police began to examine her past relationships and any details that could reveal the secret of her disappearance. But suspicions began to mount heavily around Thomas. He always changed his story when asked about his last encounter with Ann. The investigation uncovered unexplained wounds on Ann's body on the day she vanished. Was this a planned murder? Local media began focusing on Thomas Capano, with increasing rumors about his involvement in Ann's disappearance. People began to wonder, was this just an accident, or was it something planned all along? Leaked information about their recent disputes in the days leading up to their breakup caused the press to focus on Thomas as the prime suspect. As the investigation deepened, Thomas began to show signs of anxiety, which made the police even more suspicious of his involvement in the case. After weeks of intensive searching, Ann Marie Fahey's body was discovered in a remote area outside Delaware. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, which made it difficult to immediately determine the cause of death. However, preliminary investigations showed signs of being beaten and tortured. This discovery was a shock to everyone, especially to Ann's family and friends, who had hoped it was just a case of a missing person. Now, things were far more complicated. The trial of Thomas Capano for the murder of Ann Marie Fahey began in a Delaware courtroom. Tensions were high, as the prosecution presented compelling evidence of Capano's involvement in the crime. The evidence was strong, but Thomas insisted on his innocence, claiming he was a victim of a conspiracy. As the trial progressed, the prosecution unveiled irrefutable evidence that Thomas was responsible for Ann's death. In court, testimonies began to pour in. Ann's friends and family spoke about the tumultuous relationship between Ann and Thomas, and the visible tensions in the days leading up to her death. Some witnesses also discussed strange behaviors from Thomas in the days before Ann's disappearance. These testimonies only heightened suspicions, placing him squarely in the defendant's seat. With more evidence emerging, it became clear that Thomas was behind the crime. His fingerprints were found at the crime scene, along with other testimonies condemning his behavior. The court began presenting scientific evidence, such as DNA analysis, which directly linked Thomas to the crime. As the investigation advanced, it became increasingly difficult for Thomas to evade the charges. In the end, Thomas Capano was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Ann Marie Fahey. Despite his numerous attempts to defend himself, the evidence and testimonies were clear enough to convict him. This marked the tragic end of one of Delaware's most captivating cases. The true source of the story, the case of Thomas Capano and Ann Marie Fahey, occurred in Delaware, United States, in June 2012. The case was closed with a life sentence for Thomas Capano in 2014.